All right, I've recorded like 3 times now, and they always come out long, so I'm just going to bum rush it. We're reading Exodus chapter 20, verses 4, 5, and 6. Do not make an idol for yourself, whether in the shape of anything in the heavens above, or on the earth below, or in the waters underneath the earth. Do not bow and worship to them. Do not serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquity on the children to the third and fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing faithful love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commands. So that is, of course, the second commandment that God gave to Moses on Mount Sinai, to pass down to the Jewish people who God was with at the time. The statement that he's trying to make is pretty clear. It's his first position on idols, or the way that humans interact and value things here on earth. He makes it very clear, first of all, that he created everything, right? That he points out everything on the heavens above, earth below, and water underneath the earth. He made all of that stuff. So the first thing he does is kind of point out how stupid it is that we take these gifts that he gave us and basically submit to them instead of submitting to God. The goal I want for this Devo is to kind of lower our understanding of what an idol is to kind of fit what God was trying to say. To the Jews who he was passing this information to at the time, the message was pretty clear. There was a lot of different people groups who worshipped a lot of different gods, right? They made golden statues of calves and other demonic entities. And God just wanted to point out to the Jewish people, like, don't be part of that, right? You don't need these things on earth. You don't need these images of things that I have already created. You can just worship me directly. Obviously, I feel like we don't do that anymore. Like, we, Christians especially, are pretty good at not worshiping these false pagan gods, right, in the literal sense of what an idol is. But God makes it clear that these aren't just about, right, literal false gods, but other things that could come before him. Things that he created that we take and worship instead of him. So the second kind of layer to that, of course, is sin, right? Things that we turn to instead of God, things that we worship or submit to. It can be money, it can be some sort of substance use, addiction, porn addiction, right? Our sinful lifestyle that we just prefer, right? Maybe we may idolize our hatred or our anger or our pride. And of course, making these idols and putting them before God, kind of the second layer of what an idol could be. And I feel like that's pretty straightforward too. Like, sin is sin. It doesn't need that much explaining. So I wanted to point out what I consider the third layer of what an idol could be. And these are things that aren't necessarily sinful. In fact, in some cases, they can be really good. And we are just misusing them by submitting our time or our energy or our attention to them instead of God. Something that came up for me that I submit to instead of God is my education. My education is something that I value, and I feel that it is a gift from God, just the same way that everything else in the world is. But I have problems taking that gift and putting it before God, giving it more time than I give God, letting it interrupt my prayer and my study of the Bible and everything that I do. It kind of fights for my attention and my values. It fights with God. And this can be all sorts of things. It could be social media, the internet in general. It could be all sorts of hobbies or collections or um, like going to the movies, like really basic stuff. That is just um, things here on earth that take us away from God. In this passage, I also really like it because God points out why we are not to do these things. And he says that he is a jealous God. And that is understandable. Like, he created us for the sole purpose of his glory. So if we're not glorifying him, like, that's got to be like pretty frustrating. Like, if you make something and it doesn't do what you wanted it to do, like, you're not going to appreciate that from that thing that you made. He also points out, and I find this really interesting, that the introduction of idols into a family lasts for generations. Fathers are passing this down to their children, who are passing it down to their children, and it can corrupt the whole family bloodline, but only for a certain amount of time. Sin isn't that powerful, and ultimately, God will come and redeem that family when he sees fit. Whereas the families that pursue God to begin with, that is a lasting connection and a lasting kind of worship. So it lasts for generations. It doesn't need intervention because God is already there protecting that. So I want to challenge you guys for this week. Try to identify an idol in your life. Anything that is ultimately coming before God, something that is taking your time away from studying your Bible or praying or being in fellowship or being in worship. And try to limit that stuff. Set that to, like, set a timer if it's a timed activity, like, or make sure you're scheduling in times to spend with God. Try to balance that idol. Even if it's a good thing, try to balance it with God so that it's not interfering with God. All right, that's all I have to say. Goodbye.